In 1932 and 1933, a genocide took place in Soviet Ukraine called Holodomor. The genocide was created by Joseph Stalin, the former leader of the Soviet Union. Approximately 7 to 10 million Ukrainians ended up as victims to the Great Famine, either killed and eaten on the streets or slowly waiting for death in agony and hunger. On top of the food restriction, there was a restriction for knowledge. The victims of Holodomor weren't even allowed to get books written in Ukrainian. Stalin's government had a phobia of Ukrainian books. Books could teach the new generations about Ukrainian culture and language, and censoring national literature would erase the Ukrainian identity. Us, Ukrainians, still remember this event. We've built statues, organized memorial services, and marked every fourth Saturday in November as the Ukrainian Famine and Genocide Day. Astonishingly, the Ukrainian people survived the years of 1932 and 33. Never in history has the Soviet government successfully attempted to destroy my people and culture. Stalin fiercely underestimated Ukrainian people's will and strength. Stalin hasn't succeeded in destroying our literature, language, and cultural heritage. This leads to our main question. How has Ukraine kept up with such cool conditions? What is a strong nation's secret to staying resilient? Here's your 3-step guide. Number 1, collective sense of identity. For us Ukrainians, supporting each other in any kind of condition is the norm, even if you're helping a stranger. Ukrainians consider themselves as one big family, related or unrelated. The significance of a shared identity is unbelievably powerful. According to a study by Hofstede Insights, collectivism is described as a tightly knit framework in society in which individuals can expect their relatives or members of a particular in-group to look after them in exchange for unquestioning loyalty. Just like Hofstede said, in the 1990s Soviet Ukraine, Ukrainians saw themselves as a collective group of people tied by a shared heritage that was distinct and individual from the one of the colonizing USSR. The inherent bond between people and the national community will get stronger, which will lead to people having more power and resilience. If we look at this graph, we see a very low score for individualism and indulgence of the Ukrainian society, but almost a perfect one for uncertainty avoidance. That proves our collective sense of identity. Number 2, staying hopeful regardless of your setbacks. Do you guys know Naruto and Zenitsu? How do you think these anime characters are connected to countries staying resilient? In every single fight, Naruto would always find a way to defeat the opponent, no matter what they say or do to him. If you apply these traits to a country, you would oppose anyone who tries to invade the country and never stop defending it until the enemy gives up. On the other hand, there's Zenitsu, the yellow-haired guy from Demon Slayer who refused to go on his first job of fighting demons. Zenitsu is always frightened, self-doubting, and gives into the bands easily. Now let's apply his traits to a country. It would most likely be a country that would feel absolutely no power to resist, and take on a passive role during colonization, out of fear of what would happen if they just stood up for themselves. In the case of Holodomor and the Soviet Union, the Soviets were successful in invading Ukraine. So you might be asking, how is Ukraine like Naruto? The reality is, the path to freedom of Ukraine wasn't a straight line. Ukrainian citizens were initially shocked by the invasion, but they came back to protest and fight. Ukraine in the 1990s, along with other nations, publicly protested against the USSR. On the 1990th New Year, 3 million Ukrainians held their arms together to form a long chain of humans from the western city of Lviv all the way to Kiev. Later, it became known as the Ukrainian Wave, and the biggest protest for freedom of Soviet Ukraine. There is another significant action people can take: referendums. The thing that had the most impact on the revolution was the 1991 Ukrainian independence referendum. 28,804,071 people agreed to be independent. 92% of the whole Ukraine made one decision together to change their life and country forever. Mainly, the most important thing for Ukrainians is having hope anytime and anywhere, because it can sometimes be a motivation for us during hard times. And finally, number 3, people not being afraid to make sacrifices. Before we get into this deeper, I would like to make just one thing clear, that sacrifices are not the same as forced actions. It's just that you might think they're the same in some situations. A sacrifice is when a person is afraid to lose something, but it will do good for others, so you take the generous action out of free will. But why do this despite everything you can do for yourself? Because giving what you already have and altruistically sharing it with someone else results in a chain reaction where everybody looks out for each other. If an action means something to a person, it is a sacrifice. If a person has an action to take, but they just don't understand why they need to do it because someone else has given them the instruction to do it, it's a forced action. The propaganda in the Soviet Union literally had its own world of ideas, fake purposes, and reasons for people to just feel motivated and satisfied with who and what they're working for, to not create any kind of conflict with the passage to freedom of a country. Arguably, this meant that the Soviets didn't really feel a need to sacrifice their lives for the country. Conversely, Ukrainians were willing to give up their wants and needs for the greater good of their country. For example, the Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Union was founded in 1976 and was active until all, and by all, I mean every single one of the members was caught and put in jail in 1981. The members of this group were sentenced to living in camps and prisons for over 10 years because of anti-Soviet agitation. The members of this group sacrificed their safety, knowing that they were doing so for a greater purpose. I personally think that sacrifices are what makes the country and the people keep going, because sacrifices are thought-provoked and meaningful. So those were the 3 things that made the strongest cultures in the world. General altruism, resilience, and making sacrifices helped us fight for freedom in 1990. Now, in 2023, with the war between Ukraine and Russia, I think it's really important to maintain these 3 things, because history is almost repeating itself. We Ukrainians are tired of fighting over and over again for something that we should have out of free will. But we will never give up. If I could write a letter to my future self, I would first ask, is Ukraine still the way it is now? I wouldn't ask what's going on at school or that kind of stuff. I would first like to know if I would still have the identity that I have now, if I would still have the Ukrainian citizenship, or if it doesn't exist anymore. I'd like to tell my future self to support the people around you. Sacrifice your interests for others sometimes, and never lose hope in Ukraine. I would like to end my talk with 1 minute of silence in the memory of victims of Holodomor. I'd like to do this in a traditional way, like how Ukrainians do it on the 4th Saturday of November. I would like everyone to please stand up and close your eyes. I'll mind the time, and you merge your thoughts. Thank you.